Hi, all, and welcome to the third part of our series, The Many Marriages of Nero. In our previous two episodes, we looked at Nero's path to becoming the fifth Roman emperor, a position he attained at the age of only 16. The previous emperor, Claudius, had died under highly suspicious circumstances. The general consensus among historians is that he was likely poisoned on the order of Nero's mother, Agrippina. Our first episode focused mostly on Agrippina. She was a charming woman and a brilliant political player, and it was thanks to her efforts that Nero was in a position to inherit the throne in the first place. The office of emperor would have almost certainly gone to Claudius's biological son, Britannicus, were it not for Agrippina's campaign to have Claudius adopt Nero. Agrippina also arranged Nero's first marriage to Claudius's daughter, Claudia Octavia. Our second episode focused on this deeply unfortunate woman. Nero couldn't stand Claudia Octavia and made no secret of the fact that he cheated on her at every opportunity. When her father died and Nero took the throne, Claudia Octavia became the unloved and ignored Empress of Rome. Agrippina's greatest ambition, to have her son become emperor, had been fulfilled. But now what? Would Nero have any use for his politically savvy mother now that he was the most powerful person in Rome? How far would she go to maintain her influence on her son? What would Nero do with his neglected wife, Claudia Octavia, now that her powerful father had been eliminated? And lastly, what was to be done about Britannicus, Claudius's surviving teenage son? What if he decided to press a claim to the throne? We'll answer each of these questions in this episode. At the age of 17, the young Emperor Nero had developed a habit of going out at night, getting quite drunk, and using his impunity as emperor to engage in all sorts of mayhem, including rape and murder. During one of these episodes, he met a woman named Claudia Acte. She was a beautiful freedwoman from Asia Minor, and unlike his wife, Nero fell deeply in love with her. Number 3. Claudia Acte. Nero began scheduling regular rendezvous with Acte, but kept the affair a secret, primarily to keep it hidden from his mother, whom he knew would fiercely disapprove. Unlike his wife, Octavia, Nero seemed to have genuine fondness for Acte. Seneca, for one, encouraged the affair. He knew that Nero's predilections in the bedroom sometimes ran toward the extreme, and he figured it was better for Nero to get it out of his system with a freedwoman than with the empress. It was only a matter of time, though, until the first woman in Nero's life found out. Agrippina was, indeed, furious when she learned of the affair. She seemed to take deep personal offense, calling Acte, according to Tacitus, my rival, the ex-slave, or my daughter-in-law, the servant. She forbade Nero from seeing Acte. She didn't, or couldn't, know that her son was slowly but steadily growing beyond the reach of her thumb, and as so often happens with teens, her prohibition only made Nero want Acte more. Nero begged his mother for permission to divorce Octavia and remarry Acte. He had a fake family tree drawn up to give her a heritage more suitable for an emperor, and even bribed former consuls to testify to the effect that she was highborn. Agrippina, who took pride in the skillful machinations that had seen her son married to Octavia, seethed. Octavia, like always, was ignored. At one point, Agrippina even threatened, however sincerely, to throw her support behind Britannicus if her son wouldn't fall in line. Nero grew so furious with his mother's controlling hand that he began threatening to abdicate. Agrippina, fearful of seeing all of her hard work undone, made a hard course correction. She began begging Nero's forgiveness, offered him free access to her own personal fortune, and offered him refuge in the privacy of her bedroom, where he could escape the stresses of his imperial responsibilities. Nero was briefly placated by these overtures, but a rift had grown between him and his mother, one that would never be repaired. In what appears to be a kind of tit-for-tat repayment of Agrippina's disapproval of Acte, Nero then banished Pallas, his mother's longtime confidant and possible lover, from court. Agrippina was livid. Nero knew that his mother would very possibly move against him. Nero had always been aware of the presence in Britannicus of a rival claimant to the throne, but facing the prospect of a renewed undermining from his mother, he set out to eliminate his competitor once and for all. Britannicus was aware that his existence was precarious, and he began employing food tasters to test any food or drink that he received. Tacitus reports that in 55 AD, Nero and Britannicus's relationship had developed a sexual component. The truth of this claim and the possible motivations, whether Nero sought to humiliate Britannicus or possibly whether Britannicus sought to charm Nero, are unknown. The night before Britannicus's 15th birthday, Nero, only 18 himself, invited Britannicus to dinner in the imperial palace. Britannicus accepted. He had all of his food and drink tasted as usual, but at one point in the evening he was served a hot drink. He cried aloud that it had burned his lips and asked for some water to be added to the drink to cool it off. A servant did as Britannicus asked, and Britannicus took a second sip. He was dead within minutes. One momentary slip was all it took. Agrippina, recognizing the assassination for what it was enraged. Nero coolly suggested that perhaps Britannicus had epilepsy, a theory which a minority of historians actually still advance. With the death of Britannicus, the rift that had begun with Agrippina's disapproval of Acte had developed into something like full-blown war between mother and son. Nero continued to purge his administration of Agrippina's friends and loyalists. In search of allies, she struck up a renewed friendship with Nero's neglected wife, Octavia. As with many other figures in this story, historians disagree on the precise nature of their relationship. It's not contested that Agrippina became closer friends with Octavia, but some claim that their bond was more intimate. Either way, Nero was sufficiently annoyed to officially banish his mother from the imperial palace in 56 AD. 2 uneasy years later, in 58 AD, one spurned former ally of Agrippina, Junia Silana, approached Nero with a claim that his mother was participating in a treasonous plot to depose her son and replace him with an illustrious young patrician named Rubellius Plautus. Nero, incensed, demanded the death of both his mother and Plautus. Seneca managed to calm him and eventually got Nero to accept the idea of putting his mother on trial rather than having her summarily executed. At the trial, Agrippina deployed one of her most reliable weapons, her eloquence. In a speech every bit as rhetorically savvy as any male politician's, she denounced the friends who had turned on her, made exquisitely subtle insinuations that the Praetorian Guard remained more loyal to her than to her son, and made the dramatic revelation that Nero had been conducting an affair with a woman named Poppaea Sabina, the wife of one of Nero's closest friends. Finally, she dismissed as nonsense the idea that she would plot against her own blood. She finished her speech with a righteous demand to face her accuser, her son. Agrippina was acquitted. It was a massive political victory and a major blow against Nero. Plautus received no punishment, not even chastisement, and Agrippina successfully lobbied her son to have her accusers punished. Number 4. Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea Sabina, born in 30 AD, was 7 years older than Nero. She came from a wealthy, new Pompeian family in the brick and tile business, and she was noted from childhood for her intelligence and cunning. If this description sounds unusually reminiscent of another woman in Nero's life, Poppaea was also reputed to be, like Agrippina, unusually beautiful. At 14, a typical age for a Roman girl to be married, Poppaea wed the commander of the Praetorian Guard under Claudius. But that didn't stop her from enjoying her youth. She developed a reputation as something of a party girl. Tacitus wrote of her that,
"She rarely appeared in public, but when she did, she half veiled her face, to leave the curious unsatisfied, or because the look became her. For her bedfellows, She took married men and bachelors alike. She was indifferent to her reputation, yet insensible of men's love, and, herself, unloving.
By the time Nero first met Poppaea, probably in early 58 AD, she was married to her second husband, Nero's close friend, frequent carousing companion, and future emperor, Marcus Otho. Tacitus, clearly no fan, believed that Poppaea had married Otho specifically to get closer to Nero. Otho often bragged to Nero about his attractive new wife. This, predictably, piqued Nero's interest, and before long, Poppaea was conducting an affair with the emperor. Otho bristled at the prospect of having to share his wife with Nero, but Poppaea had made up her mind. She wanted the upgrade. She began to pursue an exclusive relationship with Nero, the latter of whom, to minimize awkwardness, awarded Otho a governorship in Lusitania, a Roman province roughly corresponding to modern-day Portugal, thus getting Otho as far away from him as possible while appearing to honor him in the process. With Otho out of the picture, Poppaea was free to remarry. Nero, however, was still married to the long-suffering Octavia. Poppaea teased Nero, often not good-naturedly, about being a mama's boy and too cowardly to divorce his wife. Further, Agrippina was, as she had previously been with Acte, vehemently opposed to this new pair. As she tried to steer her son away from this newest dalliance, rumors began to circulate that Agrippina was using unconventional methods of persuasion. Tacitus writes,
Agrippina's passion to keep her power carried her to the point where, at midday, an hour at which Nero was beginning to experience the warmth of wine and good food, she presented herself on several occasions to her half-drunk son, coquettishly dressed and ready for incest. Sexual kissing, and endearments that were the precursors of guilt, had already been observed by their close circle.
It didn't help that Nero and Agrippina were often spotted traveling together in an enclosed litter. Whatever was really happening, Agrippina was making a last-ditch attempt at salvaging her credibility with her son. But other influential figures in Nero's life were reluctant to let Agrippina reconcile with her son again. At the bidding of Seneca, who was worried for his young charge's safety should he re-embrace the unpopular Agrippina, former Forbidden Flame Acte came to Nero and told him that his mother had become a persona non grata to much of the Roman military, and that by publicly reconciling with her, Nero was risking a revolt in the ranks. At this news, as Tacitus puts it, Nero no longer postponed the long-contemplated crime. Nero decided to kill his mother. Tacitus also wrote that Poppaea was a major accomplice in planning Agrippina's death, but her actual involvement is disputed. There's no doubt, though, that however involved she may have been, Poppaea approved of the plan. Agrippina, as far as Poppaea was concerned, was the only thing preventing her from becoming Empress of Rome. Poppaea may or may not have been aware that around the same time, as Cassius Dio writes, Nero had taken another mistress, one that supposedly resembled to an uncanny degree Agrippina. There's no agreed-upon narrative of the events that led to Agrippina's death. Nero knew he couldn't do anything too obvious. Even for a Roman emperor who largely enjoyed impunity from the law, matricide was beyond the beyonds. Nero was an avid theater-goer and actor, and most versions of the story begin with Nero being inspired during a play that featured some kind of special effect shipwreck. Nero called upon his mother to visit him in the seaside resort town of Baiae. She had apparently caught whispers that her son was plotting against her, something involving a boat, and traveled there by land just in case. When she arrived, Nero received her warmly, allaying her concerns. He had thrown a lavish party, and after a few hours both mother and son had enjoyed their share of wine. Agrippina remarked that she needed to get home, and Nero escorted her down to the dock to say goodbye. Tacitus writes,
He saw her on her way. He clung to her breast more closely than usual and kissed her eyes. This may have been a final touch of hypocrisy, or possibly the last sight of his doomed mother affected even that brutal heart.
Agrippina boarded the ship sometime after midnight and began the trip back home. What happened next varies in the telling. In some versions, the boat had been rigged by Nero to sink itself, by splitting in half, opening up at the bottom, or with a collapsing ceiling. In other versions, Nero intentionally had the boat rammed. Regardless, the ship was doomed. As the water filled with flailing bodies, Agrippina's closest servant, Acerronia, drew attention to herself, shouting that she was Agrippina. The ruse worked, and as Acerronia was beaten to death by oarsmen, the real Agrippina got away and was rescued by fishermen. Nero's attempt on his mother's life had failed. Word got back to Nero that his mother had miraculously survived a catastrophe at sea. He was crestfallen. Forced at last to act openly, he ordered the Praetorian Guard to kill Agrippina. They refused. Finally, Nero found a team of 3 willing freedmen and dispatched them to finish the job. Agrippina must have wondered why there had been no word from her son after her miraculous survival. As the hours passed, her domestic servants began to sneak away one by one. By the time the assassins finally arrived, she seems to have figured out what was coming. Cassius Dio writes,
When she saw them, she knew for what they had come, and leaping up from her bed, she tore open her clothing, exposing her abdomen, and cried out, Strike here, Anicetus, strike here, for this womb bore Nero.
When Nero was presented with his mother's corpse, he was reportedly lost for words. After composing himself, he said to have remarked, I had no idea I had such a beautiful mother. Thus ended the first and longest love of Nero's life. Thanks for listening. Join us next time when, incredibly, it gets worse.
Hi, Gaius here. Thanks for being part of our efforts to shed light on the more obscure topics related to the fascinating world of the ancient Romans. If you enjoyed Titus's work here, please do us a favor by liking and subscribing. Gratias vobis ago.